This is the people of the state of Colorado versus James Egan Holmes, case number 12 CR 1522. The record should reflect that Mr. Holmes is present with his attorneys and the prosecutors are present as well. Are the parties ready for the jury, Mr. Orman?
I'm ready, Your Honor.
Ms. Spengler? Yes. Let's bring him in, please. Please be seated, everyone. The record should reflect that the jury has joined us again. Welcome back, folks. One housekeeping matter. I didn't want to forget to tell you that on June 19, we're going to stop at 3:30 because one of you needs to stop at that time. And so plan accordingly, okay? Before the break, Mr. Orman, you were still in your direct examination of Special Agent Rigopoulos, and so I'm going to allow you to continue with your direct examination at this time with a reminder to Special Agent Rigopoulos that you're still under oath.
Thanks, sir.
All right, you may proceed.
Sir, I want to now ask you some questions about explosive and incendiary devices. What is a flammable substance?
Flammable substance is a material that is easily ignitable, readily available on our commercial market.
What would be the most common flammable substance that people in North America would be familiar with?
Typically we see gasoline is the most common.
When you were in the defendant's apartment, did you smell gasoline?
Yes, I did.
Did you see any evidence that the defendant had put gasoline or motor oil on the carpet of the apartment?
Yes, I did.
What was that?
Besides the overwhelming odor, you could smell the vapors in the air. The gasoline permeated the carpet, and it was under the layer. And as far as the oil, you could see oil stains next to where some of the oil cans were laid down on the rug in the defendant's apartment.
Did you see any evidence that the defendant had made efforts to mask the smell of gasoline?
Yes, I did.
What was that?
There is two items that are commercially available that I observed, one being those Christmas trees that you can purchase and put in your car. They're aromatic. Those were placed on the floor near the door, as well as, I'm not sure the exact brand, but the Renews-It type of air fresheners that you can purchase that have the plastic lid you can gauge to go up really high or down low to allow the odors to be masked by this product. And those are also placed by the door.
Before we get further into what was in the apartment, if you saturate a carpet with gasoline and motor oil, is it more or less likely to catch on fire than just regular carpet?
More specifically with the gasoline. Gasoline it vaporizes very easily. And when you pour gasoline on a carpet versus on just a regular floor, the carpet has strands that are coming up. And as the gasoline would soak into the carpet, it's also adhering to those strands that you would have. So the surface area is exponentially increased, which allows the vaporization to occur even faster than it would if you just were to pour it on the floor. So it allows for tremendous vapor production.
Now, when I was a kid, my dad taught me to keep flames away from gasoline. And he said it was the fumes, not the liquid.
The testimony, Your Honor.
Overruled. I understand. It's just part of the question. Go ahead. Get to the question.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Orman.
Was he right to say it was the fumes and not the liquid?
That's accurate.
If you subject gasoline fumes to a flame source, what can happen?
And start the burn, and it could cause an ensuing fuel fire.
Did the defendant set up anything in his apartment that was capable of starting such a fire? In other words, an ignition source.
Yes, he did.
Where was that ignition source located?
There's an ignition source placed on the floor once you came into the door. In the photograph, this black-colored powder. It was also later identified by our chemists as potassium permanganate.
What happens when you mix glycerin and potassium permanganate?
These items are oxidizers and fuels, and some of them are incompatible, such as these. When these two are mixed, it's a hypergolic reaction. This reaction it allows tremendous heat to be generated, which will have an ensuing fire, a very aggressive burning fire, which would be a combination of these two materials.
Now, you talked about the tripwire. Can we please take a look at 4856, please? You can sort of see the tripwire a little better there. Now, would the tripwire have worked better if it had been placed at foot level?
Your Honor. Calls for speculation.
Overruled. Don't speculate, sir. Answer the question only if you can answer it in terms of your expertise.
In my opinion, I believe it's most efficiently placed like this, where one would not step over it. They would definitely intercept it as they're moving through the doorway.
Do you have an opinion as to whether a person entering that apartment could have activated this device?
Yes, I do.
What is that opinion?
Objection, Your Honor. May we approach?
Yes. Okay, the objection is overruled. You may proceed.
Do you remember the question?
Yes, I do.
Give me an answer then, please.
Yeah, I have an opinion that an individual rushing through this door could set this booby trap off, starting a fire by the method I explained earlier.
Now, could that flame from the glycerin potassium permanganate mixture ignite gasoline fumes in that apartment?
Yes, it could, and I'll elaborate a little further if I may.
Okay.
That I think it's important to recognize, once again, part of the design of this device, the way that this frying pan was also placed, it was on the ground. The properties of gasoline vapor allow the vapor to go down, as you might have seen as you're pumping gas, the vapors go down. So the vapors that would be generated would be low, and that would be in the proximity of where this aggressive flame would start to burn if this was enacted.
I'd like to talk to you now about explosives. We've talked about flammable substances, incendiary substances. What is an explosive?
An explosive is an energetic material that when initiated, or if the word started, it can convert from its whatever state it's in, whether it's a solid or a liquid or even a vapor, but it converts into gases. And these gases, by nature, they must expand, and they're going to expand in all directions. That's an explosion coming from the base explosive.
Can you tell me the difference between a high explosive and a low explosive?
High explosives are the things you may traditionally be familiar with from watching television, such as TNT, dynamite, C4. And those are designed as tools, but they're designed to detonate. That means that they go from a solid to a gas almost instantaneously. And the speeds are dramatically faster than low explosives. Low explosives are traditionally powders that we typically see in the open market, such as black powder, smokeless powder, and depending on which state you're in, your ability to purchase these for consumer use. Now, low explosives, unlike high, they are designed to deflagrate, which means burn very aggressively, but they are not designed to detonate as a high explosive is.
Do you have an opinion as to whether there were any high explosives found in the defendant's apartment?
Yes, I do.
What's that opinion?
There were none that were recovered.
Do you have an opinion as to whether there were low explosives found in the defendant's apartment?
Yes, I do.
What low explosives?
Low explosives that were recovered included double base smokeless powder, as was identified by our chemists, as well as in the time fuse that was recovered, there's a quantity of pyrotechnic mixture and black powder in those, as well as thermite mixtures that were recovered. Those are all classified in the low explosives.
What is thermite?
Thermite is a mixture which is designed to produce tremendous amounts of heat.
Can you give us an example of what a intended use of thermite is? Like, let's say the Army was going to use it. How would they use it?
Thermite's used in the military as a...
Object to relevance.
Why don't you ask a more general question about the uses of thermite?
All right. Is thermite used, does it have a legitimate use?
It does in military application.
All right. What is that legitimate use?
Same objection.
Overruled.
The use in military application would be, for an example, if an artillery unit with cannons was being overrun by enemy forces. The troops could take an incendiary device such as this with thermite, and they could drop it in the barrel of the artillery cannon.
And I continue to note my objection to this descriptive testimony.
Overruled. He's talking about the use of thermite. Overruled.
The soldiers could drop the thermite grenade into the cannon of that was theirs as they're being overrun, and it would render it useless. It's extremely high temperatures, and it would absolutely wreck that piece of equipment.
You're talking extremely high temperatures like what?
In the approximation around 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
So is thermite an explosive or an incendiary material?
It's classified in the explosive area. However, it's an incendiary device based on the nature of the heat that it generates.
Now, I want to ask you some conclusions, or if you have conclusions, about what the stuff in the apartment was. As an expert in explosives and hazardous devices, do you have opinions as to what the items in the apartment were and what they were designed to do?
Yes, I do.
If we could please take a look at 4140. Let's take a look at this. You can't really see everything in here, but I want to ask you some questions. First of all, we see some green bottles on the floor surrounding and to the rear of that wooden chair and that black chair. Do you see those?
Yes, I do.
Do you know what was inside those bottles?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
From the samples that we took as identified by our FBI chemists as
Saying confrontation, things that were identified by other individuals.
Mr. Orman?
Your Honor, it is information that he relies upon in his area of expertise, and it is something that he's considering in his opinion.
Why don't you establish more foundation along those lines? The objection is sustained.
Do you rely upon information from chemists in your lab in formulating your opinions?
I do rely on those results to formulate my opinions, yes.
And are those results something that are given to you so that you can do that?
That is correct.
And is that something people in your field of expertise generally, normally rely upon in doing their business?
That is correct.
I think I've established an adequate foundation, Your Honor.
Are you intending to have a chemist testify about those substances?
I don't know, Your Honor. Maybe or maybe not.
All right, would counsel approach, please? All right, the objection is sustained, but Mr. Orman, you may proceed as we discussed at the bench.
Did you smell we can have that exhibit up again, please? Did you smell the contents of those bottles as they were being collected?
Yes, I did.
What did it smell like?
It smelled similar to what I know as gasoline.
Right. Do you think it was gasoline?
I do.
If gasoline in a plastic soda bottle has an ignition source, is it capable of starting a fire?
Yes, it is.
So would each of those bottles be individual firebombs?
Yes, they would.
Back to the characterization in the testimony from counsel.
If you want to object to the form of the question, object to the form of the question and say it's leading. The objection is improper and it's overruled. You may proceed.
Now, in addition to those green bottles, there is a clear bottle in front of the chair with a cap on it. Were you involved in sampling and collecting that bottle?
Yes.
Did you smell the material inside it?
Yes.
What did it smell like?
Gasoline.
So would that particular bottle, if it caught on fire, be an individual firebomb?
This one is a little different than the others in that the cap is still on it. In my opinion, what would happen in this case, as an ensuing fire around it, it would burn. Eventually, the container on this may fail, allowing for a continued flowing fuel fire after some time has elapsed once the initial fire has initiated.
All right, if you could, there's a microphone there next to you, handheld. And if you could use that, and there's a pointer behind you. You previously indicated that thermite was present where? Point that out for us, please.
We identified thermite was present in these locations in this hash sphere here, here, and what's out of sight, there's another glass jar in this location here, as well as we identified in this ceramic bowl on the floor in this location as well.
Thank you. And you indicated that there was black powder or smokeless powder found. Did you actually see containers of smokeless powder in the apartment?
Containers, there was, from what we recovered, were inside of spheres here.
Okay, you misunderstood my question. I mean, like, you would go to the store and buy it, containers.
Yes, we did. We have empty containers that were recovered in the garbage can in the apartment.
And I'd like you to actually sit down for a second. I want to ask you some more questions. Inside those jars, those pickle jars, and there's a third one off that we can't really see right now, there's a powder on the top. Do you have an opinion as to what that powder is?
My opinion is it's double-base smokeless powder.
Okay, and there's a white linear object going from that chair, the item on the black chair, down towards the bottom of the picture. Do you have an opinion as to what that line is?
Yes, I do.
What is your opinion as to what that is?
I believe that's a type of fuse. A fuse is a component in this device that burns. And in this instance, it's what we'll call quick fuse.
Did you see packaging for quick fuse in the defendant's apartment?
Yes, we did.
Where was that located?
My recollection, I believe it came from the garbage can.
How fast does quick fuse burn?
Quick fuse burns at 0.2, in 1 foot and 0.2, let me back up. It can burn 1 foot in, Mr. Orman, if I could have something to refresh my memory from my report, I might be able to.
If you could look at your report, would that refresh your memory?
It may. Yes, it might. I want to be accurate.
May I show him his report, Your Honor?
Yes? And if you would review it to yourself and then put it down, face down when you're done,
Yes, sir.
all right? Right, Mr. Orman, you may ask him the next question.
So, how fast does quick fuse burn?
Well, hold on, did that refresh your memory?
Yes, it did, sir.
All right, ask your question.
Sorry, Your Honor, thank you. How fast does it burn?
Quick fuse burns at 0.2 of a second per foot.
So, would that be 5 feet a second?
That's correct.
Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, additionally, in this photograph, going over leading towards the bicycle are green things that look like fuses. Do you have an opinion as to what those are?
Yes, I do.
What is your opinion?
My opinion is those are called hobby fuse.
How fast does hobby fuse burn?
Hobby fuse burns at approximately 1.5 seconds per foot.
Did you find packaging for hobby fuse in the apartment?
Yes, we did.
Where was that found?
That was also found in the garbage can in the defendant's apartment.
Were you present when the pickle jars were removed from the apartment?
I was at the apartment downstairs in evidence collection.
Did you see them?
Yes, I did.
Now, there's sort of a sludgy liquid looking like at the bottom surrounding some ammunition. Did you smell that?
I couldn't smell it in the jar as it came out in this condition.
Okay. We've had previous testimony that napalm was put in those. Was it consistent with what you know to be napalm?
Yes.
Now let's talk about the bullets in those jars. Would you agree with me that bullets, in and of themselves, are not an explosive under Colorado law?
Under that definition, that's correct.
So you can have 1,000,000 bullets in your house, but that's not necessarily a bomb, right?
That's correct.
What happens, though, to those bullets if these jars catch on fire?
The way the bullet is constructed, it has a primer that's in the back which a firing pin would strike. And that impact causes heat inside of the primer, and it starts a burning process. The primer would then influence, from that burning process, the powders that are inside the cartridge itself. And then the cartridge would deflagrate, as I described earlier, burning, and it would go from a solid to a gas. And as designed in a rifle, it would push the bullet out down the barrel. But if it's in an open condition like this, that powder could once again ignite and cause a small explosion inside this jar.
If we could please put up 4143, please. Now, we're going to talk about that fuse that's going in there in a second, but do you see that fuse going towards the bottom?
Yes, I do.
Where does that end up in the jar?
It appears to go right into the smokeless powder.
And can a fuse ignite smokeless powder?
Yes, it can.
And then you see where the fuse is going down to the bottom. Do you know where the fuse terminates? Where the other end of the fuse is?
It terminates at the frying pan.
So if the contraption in the frying pan ignited, would it ignite that fuse?
Yes, it would.
And if that fuse ignited, would it ignite that pickle jar?
Yes, it would. And based on the length of that fuse, in approximately 1 second.
And when that pickle jar caught on fire, would that be an explosion or an incendiary device or something else?
In this instance, my opinion, it would be an incendiary device.
And then we have the half sphere on top with another fuse going off of that. Do you know where that goes?
That goes to the other glass jar.
If we can have 4145, please. Is that the other jar?
Yes, it is.
And is that the thing coming off from the right? Is that the fuse?
Yes, it is.
And is it crossed with another fuse?
Yes, it is.
And do you know where that one goes?
That one ultimately goes into the jar, and the other one goes down to the floor, and the one on the top goes to another jar that's out of the picture.
So if the fuse from the one on the black chair ignites the one on the black chair, is that going to ignite the fuse that then goes to this pickle jar?
Yes, it will.
And would this pickle jar catch on fire?
Yes, it would.
And would it then ignite the fuse that goes over to the third pickle jar?
Yes, it would.
And what would happen to that?
It would begin to burn as well.
We can go to 4142, please. Now we see a sort of a twisty wire there, sort of going down. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And we have packaging that's been recovered that says magnesium ribbon. Is that consistent with magnesium ribbon?
Yes, it is.
What's going to happen with the magnesium ribbon if it catches on fire?
It's going to burn, once again, similar to thermite with a very intense temperature.
So if that magnesium ribbon catches on fire, is it going to do anything to the materials that are down on the middle of the floor there?
It should ignite them as well.
If we can show 4150, please. And what is that?
This is the glass jar that was out of the picture that I mentioned earlier, and it's on the TV stand.
And I see two fuses from that. Where do those go, do you know?
The one comes from the pickle jar that was in the center of the room, and the other one heads back down towards the floor.
So if that, would igniting then the device in the doorway cause a chain reaction that would also ignite this?
Yes, it would.
And would that in turn light a fuse that goes down to the floor?
Yes, it would.
If we can go back to 4144, please. So if you can just You know what? I think you've already answered that question. Let's go to 4136. Does this better show the fusing coming from and going to that third pickle jar?
Yes, it does.
Can you just demonstrate for us where it's coming from and where it's going? And if you want to use the pointer and the microphone.
As mentioned before, the quick fuse would initiate in this area. The first pickle jar is out of sight. It would come to this one, ignite the material in this jar as well as the material in the half sphere. As this is igniting and burning through this quick fuse, it would ignite this material in this sphere as well as the material inside the jar. And then the other fuse would be burning down onto the floor into the other fuses which are co-located.
Now, I want to ask you a question about these spheres. Did you see these spheres?
I did.
How are they constructed?
They're plastic spheres, and the ones that are together in a full ball such as these, they're designed to come together.
Is it one sphere or two?
This is one. This on the top of the jar would be a half.
Well, I'm saying, is there anything inside the larger sphere?
Inside the larger sphere, what we identified were smaller ones.
What were inside the smaller ones?
Inside the smaller ones were identified smokeless powder, the low explosive.
So did those spheres have fuses going into them?
Yes, they do.
Now, if there was a fire caused from gasoline on the floor, would it have ignited those fuses?
Yes, it would.
And would those devices then have gone off?
That's correct.
So would the effect of tripping that device in the doorway have also activated all of these spheres on the floor?
Ultimately, it would have, yes.
Thank you. You can take your seat. When you confine the smokeless powder inside the inner sphere, inside these spheres, what does that create?
When you have smokeless powder or low explosive inside some type of containment, it allows the burning material, the gases that are being generated, to be contained. And as they're being contained, the pressure, it multiplies. It gets even greater and greater. Ultimately, the container will fail because it's not designed to hold those pressures. And that's we refer to as an explosion.
So would those spherical devices be individual explosive devices?
Yes, they would.
Now, the outer sphere, the 6-inch sphere, do you know what that was filled with, if anything?
I later
Let me ask it to you this way. Did you see those spheres taken apart?
on the video.
All right. And did you see them brought down to you?
Yes.
Did you see anything inside of them?
They had a shiny, liquidy residue on several of them.
Did it look like a flammable substance to you?
It's possible.
And if the defendant talked about filling those with some type of petroleum distillate like gasoline, would that be consistent with what you observed?
Gasoline would be logical.
Would it be consistent?
Yes, it would.
If we could please take a look at 4159. Now, let's take a look at the center of that picture. I see two smaller jars that look like they have ammunition in them. Did you observe those jars?
Yes, I did.
What did they have in them?
They contained bullets.
Was there any liquid or anything like that?
None.
So if there's a fire going off in this area, what is going to happen to those jars of bullets?
As I mentioned before, with that one container of gasoline with a lid on it, an ensuing fire in this area initially, right off the bat, wouldn't influence these bullets because they're inside the jar, but very soon after, the heat from the surrounding area would influence the bullets in the jar, and over a period of time, these bullets would begin to function, and as I described earlier, you'd have smaller explosions after the initial fire was going on.
Off to the left are two plastic bottles, and I would call that sort of an orangish red. Do you see those?
Yes, I do.
Did you observe those bottles?
Yes.
Is that a commercially available product?
Yes, it is.
What is it?
It's called Sterno.
What is Sterno?
Sterno is on the commercial market. Many people use it for like a camping type of fuel.
Is it a flammable substance?
Yes, it is.
Also in this picture, if you can look sort of to the left and then to the right, are two sort of cylinder-shaped objects. Are you familiar with those objects?
Yes, I am.
Have you seen them before?
Yes.
Are they a commercially available product that you can buy in lots of stores?
Yes, they are.
What do they contain?
These two cylinders contained propane.
Is that a flammable substance?
Yes, it is.
What is going to happen if there's a fire that these are subjected to some type of fire? What happens to those?
These cylinders are designed to have a pressure relief designed in them where it would function and release the gases, which would preclude an explosion from occurring from that container if it was in a fire.
Now, we also see in the picture, sort of to the right of that right-hand pickle jar, a sort of a square object with some wires on the top. Do you know what that is?
That is identified as like a fan for like a computer.
Is that an explosive device?
No, it's not.
Now, do you have an opinion as to the way this was designed, what role that would have played?
I do.
What is that?
Part of the design of this device, with its complexity, there's some items that were placed in it I will call distractors. And distractors are items that are designed to take your attention away from certain things and perhaps not have you focus on some of the main items, or maybe make the device appear to be something that it's not.
Now, in the middle of that, sort of in front of that right-hand jar, is a sort of a silvery box. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you know what that is?
Yes.
What is that?
That silvery box, it's a launch control brand receiver.
Do you have an opinion as to what that would do if activated?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
This receiver has attached to it wires, duplex wires, which come off. And these wires have at the end of them a really thin metal copper wire. And the way it's designed is if electrical current is allowed to flow through these wires, because of the resistance of that really thin wire, it heats up. And this wire heats up as designed to allow enough heat which would ignite like a hobby fuse type of material.
And would that have, if utilized, would that or could that have set off any of the explosive or incendiary devices in the apartment?
Yes, it could have.
Which ones do you know?
In the photograph, you can see the wires. They're going in different directions. They're attached to sections of the hobby fuse in this photograph.
Do you know where any controllers for that were found?
Yes, I do.
Where?
There's one controller that was recovered, and it's out of sight in this picture, but it's more to the left. It was on the table next to one of the green plants in the defendant's room.
In this picture also, towards the bottom, next to the frying pan, there's an octagonal-shaped object. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you know what that is?
That's what I refer to as another distractor.
What was it? Do you know?
It was an LED light that was on. It was blinking, which would take your attention away from maybe something else that was more important.
I now want to talk about these hobby fuses you talked about, the green fuses that are sort of going towards the bike. Do you see those?
Yes, I do.
Now, you can't see it in this picture where they go, but you can see they are attached to some, I guess, orangish wires. Do you have an opinion as to what those wires were and how that would have worked?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
Similar to what I described about the duplex wire, which provides heat due to the resistance, those wires are designed from a separate manufacturer, but the same type of work, where the current would run down the wire, heating up that very thin wire that's touching the hobby fuse, which would allow it to ignite, on command.
And now we've heard that those wires were attached to some type of box that was on top of the refrigerator. Do you know what type of box that was?
It was a pyrotechnic type of box.
Please put up 4197. Do you see any parts of that pyrotechnic box here in this photograph?
Yes, I do.
Can you please use the pointer and the microphone to show us?
The top part of the pyrotechnic box, after the render safe procedure and the explosion that occurred, it landed in this corner of the table, and you can see it's disfigured and based on the force of the explosion that occurred.
Let's take a look at 4198. What is this?
That's a close-up photograph for the same pyrotechnic box. This is the top part where you would connect the wires.
Now, if you can just remain there, I want to show you a couple more pictures in a second, but did the FBI collect the pieces of this, and did you take pictures of it at the lab?
Yes, we did.
Can we please take a look at 4379? What is that?
This is the photograph taken in my laboratory of the project of the pyrotechnic box top. You can see better with the better lighting, how the wires would be attached to this.
Now, one of these on the bottom appears to have an orange wire going into it. See that red one right above where it says arm?
Yes.
Do you have an opinion as to what happened to the rest of them?
The rest of them, during the render safe procedure, based on the force and the energy that was used in the explosive that was rendering this safe, it ripped the wires right out of this box as it was intended to do.
4380, please. What is that?
What you're seeing here are a couple of things. This one item here, this is the battery that would be part of that control box. We have a key, and then we have electronic circuitry, and then this is the antenna that go with it.
4381, please. And what is that?
What you see here are the remains of the plastic casing that the control box would, with the controller, that would have been kept in.
If we could please put back up 4379. Do you have an opinion then as to how this was set up?
It was set up on top of the refrigerator. It was out of sight of the main room. The wires came down from these types of terminals, and it came into the room. Once again, as was described, that the wires were individually attached to different hobby fuse. The key would be placed in here, and when it would function from a transmitter, the electronic signal could cause this thing to influence and put the current down the wires as I described earlier.
And what would happen then?
Well, at that point, the hobby fuse would ignite, and it would burn at the rate we described earlier, and it would then cause those spheres to explode.
You can have a seat. I want to ask you just a few more questions. Is this a device that's operated by a remote control?
Yes, it is.
Did you and anyone else in the FBI find the remote control in the apartment?
No.
Did you find another remote control?
Yes, we did.
What was that remote control?
The remote control that we found was one that would be used with a remote control toy.
Like a toy car?
Yes.
Now, did you hear the interview with the defendant and Agent Gummeter?
Yes, I did.
And did you hear the portion where he describes placing the remote control to this device down by the dumpster with the toy car?
Yes, I did hear that.
Now, if someone had set off that remote control down by the dumpster, do you have an opinion as to whether or not it could have activated this device?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
My opinion is it could have functioned this device.
Now, did you formulate your opinions in this case before or after listening to the interview with Special Agent Gummeter and the defendant?
Before listening to the interview.
Now, after listening to the interview, is what the information that the defendant provided about how he had made and designed this setup consistent or inconsistent with the findings that you found even without listening to that interview?
The defendant's interview was consistent with my findings, in my opinion.
Can I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Cross-examination, Ms. Spengler?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I just want to go back to the evidence collection at the apartment at 1690. You indicated earlier that you participated in that evidence collection and also had that evidence sent back to the lab in Virginia?
That's correct.
Okay. And took photographs of the items as they came into the laboratory?
That's correct.
And so in addition to some of the paperwork that was shown earlier, you also collected some pharmacy paperwork related to some medication, correct?
That's, to my knowledge, correct.
Okay. And that medication would be, well, do you remember the specific names of the medication?
No, I do not.
Okay. If I may approach, Your Honor, with what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 13 and 14?
Yes, you may.
I'll show the district attorney.
Yes.
If I may approach the witness.
You may.
I'm handing the witness it's Exhibit 13 and 14. And do you recognize those photos as binder shots because of the ruler as well as the identifying information?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so those were photos that you or someone on your team took
Yes, it is.
of that pharmacy paperwork?
Yes.
I'd move for admission of Defendant's Exhibit 13 and 14.
I don't object. I think we already have the photographs and evidence too, but I don't object.
All right, D-TR-13 and D-TR-14 are admitted without objection and may be published.
Thank you, Your Honor. We don't need to publish those now, and those are all the questions I have. Thank you.
Okay, any redirect? Okay,
Just to clarify so that there's no misunderstanding, if I showed you counsel asked you if you had collected those items, and I don't know if she was using sort of the global you as in you guys or you as in you personally. If I showed you the FBI Evidence Response Team casebook, would that actually be able to tell you who particularly collected it?
Yes, it would.
May I show it to him, Your Honor?
would that help refresh your memory, sir?
Yes, it would, sir.
All right, you may approach.
Thank you. Does that refresh your memory?
Yes, it does.
Who was that?
The collector was Supervisor Special Agent Bomb Technician William Davich.
Thank you. I don't have anything further, Your Honor.
How do you spell that name?
William, W-I-L-L-I-A-M, Davich, D-A-V-I-T-C-H.
Thank you. Is there any recross?
William Davich is part of your team.
He was part of our evidence team, yes, ma'am.
No further questions.
All right, it looks like the jury has some questions, so give us a moment, please, sir. Thank you. All right, would council please approach? And there are a lot of questions here, so feel free to mingle, just not about the case, okay? All right. Special Agent Rigopoulos, the jury has submitted some questions, and based on the rules of evidence and other applicable rules of law, I have found that some of them are appropriate, and so I'm going to ask these questions that I have found that are appropriate now. The first question is, if you had all the components, how long would it take you, you yourself personally, to set up the explosive and incendiary devices in the apartment?
Great question. So if I had everything was in the apartment, and all the explosives were mixed, because I understand some of it may have been made, it would take multiple hours to put together. You don't just put it together like a Lego set. And it's very methodical, because some things would have to be set up before others. So it would take multiple hours of focused construction to get the design as the way we found it.
The next question is, if no one had gone into the apartment for a few days, could the vapors and/or other devices or items have caused an explosion or a fire without someone or something triggering it?
The apartment is like a container. The apartment contained the vapors, and short of an ignition source, the apartment wouldn't have just spontaneously exploded.
The next question is, how small or large would the explosion in the jar have been, in your expert opinion, in feet approximately?
The jar wouldn't have exploded. The jar would have burned vigorously. That's an incendiary device, because it has a thermite mixture, and it's not contained. It's open at the top. So all the gases that would be generated would escape out of the top open area of the jar.
The next question is, did the FBI recreate the entire scene in a controlled environment as part of its investigation to understand what would have happened if it had detonated?
No, we did not.
The next question is, you said that the tripwire was attached to the door jamb. If so, why didn't it trip immediately when the door was open? And you cannot speculate. You can only answer the question if you believe you can do so based on your training and experience, education, training, and experience.
To answer the question from what we observed with the robot pushed the door open, and it wasn't slammed open. It was a slower speed, which in my opinion would cause the fluid maybe to shift or adjust. Instead of like if you yank something, it gets pulled. Like more energy would be pulling it, and that didn't happen in this occasion with the robot.
The next question is as follows. In your expert opinion, did the room full of devices appear to be set up for show, or did it seem to be assembled to actually ignite / explode / burn? Specifically, you mentioned distractors. Given their presence, is there reason to believe the setup was designed more to intimidate than do harm?
Since that's a very complex question, I'm going to answer that in stages. There are 3 ways to initiate this device. Let's cover the first one, and the fact that the question was asked about, is this to intimidate versus function? Nothing is random in the components that were designed and appropriated for this device. In my case in point, the quick fuse was used to go from the frying pan to the jar to around the room. That was used instead of the hobby fuse because of the speed in which it burns.
Actually, we approach.
That's okay. Don't speculate. And so the last part of the answer is stricken. and that means that you must disregard it, okay? So you can talk about, based on your expertise, what you observed and what conclusions you drew, but you can't speculate. So the last part of the answer is stricken, and the jury will disregard it and treat it as though the jury never heard it. All right, you may proceed.
From my examinations, the data I recovered in my examinations showed that the speed went from the quick fuse, and they didn't use green fuse in that place.
He's talking about his findings. He's not speculating at this point. He's talking about what was used, not the reason why it was or wasn't used or something else wasn't used. Go ahead.
So to answer the part of that question, was this to intimidate versus function? The fact that they used the one instead of the other showed the utility of the quick fuse versus the design of using the green fuse. So that was intentional. It wasn't because you couldn't tell from a robot.
All right, sustained. Again, you can't get into whether something was intentional or not. You can talk about what was used. You cannot talk about the reason why it was used or whether it was intentional or not. Does that make sense?
Sir, it does.
So if you can answer the question based on what was used and what wasn't used, that's okay, but you cannot get into speculating about why something was used or wasn't used, or whether something that was used or wasn't used was intentional or not. Does that
Yes,
distinction make sense?
It does.
All right, and so the jury will disregard the last part of the answer. Go ahead.
From our examination, the one fuse was used, and you could not tell from the robot which type was one from the other from our observations as we're making determinations on how the device is designed. So that eliminates the question and answers the question, was this to intimidate or not? By design, it would have functioned as designed. It would have caused explosions. It would have caused dramatic and aggressive burning based on the nature of the material that was used.
Okay, thank you. The next question, which is the final question, is, as a whole, can you explain, in your expert opinion, what the setup of the devices you examined on site was designed to accomplish? Again, don't speculate about don't speculate. You can only talk about based on your expertise and your observations and your analysis. Does that make sense?
It does.
All right.
So the three ways this could have functioned. One was with a frying pan with a hypergolic mixture we discussed earlier in my testimony. If there was a dynamic entry, which would cause the door to open very quickly, the way we're trained as law enforcement.
Outside the scope of the question.
Sustained. Go ahead. Don't go, I sustained it, so you can't go down that road. You can only answer based on your expertise in terms of what was used and what wasn't used. The question is, what was the setup designed to accomplish? And so answer it in terms of specifically.
Specifically, thank you, sir. Specifically, the first setup was designed to accomplish within 3 seconds of that fire starting. All 3 of those glass jars should have been fully engaged with an aggressive burn that I described earlier as potentially 4,000 degrees with a thermite material each now being energized. That burning would have taken place, and that's the first side. From that burning, other fuses would have ignited, causing the rest of the material to go, as well as the gas vapors in the room that were contained in the room by the apartment itself. The apartment is acting as another type of container. That's the one way it would function. The second way would have been from that small remote I described in my testimony that was recovered on the table by the plant. If that remote control was activated, and it's a line-of-sight remote, where you point it right at the receiver and you functioned it, it would have caused that electrical current to run down the lines and influence the hobby fuse that it was attached to. The hobby fuse would start to burn, causing the explosions I described earlier. The third way was from the receiver that was rendered safe on top of the refrigerator in the kitchen. This third way, if the receiver received the electronic signal to function, it would be able to fire all of those devices and allow all that hobby fuse to start to burn, and which would, once again, everything was touching itself on all the different fuses. All the devices in that apartment would have functioned had that influence happened with that receiver.
All right, thank you. Mr. Orman, do you have any follow-up questions based on the jury's questions?
Briefly, Your Honor. There was one question from the jury about distractors, and I want to ask you about that. Is that a term that you and your colleagues in your field use to describe a certain type of part of an explosive device?
Beyond the scope of the question asked by the juror.
Overruled?
Yes, it is. It's not part of an IED. It's an enhancement.
What is a distractor?
A distractor is an item that's going to take your attention away from the main components or the main functioning of the device, maybe to cause one to pause or divert their attention.
Relation.
Overruled?
And when you say one or you, are you referring to just anybody or some group of people in particular?
Whoever would encounter that explosive device.
Thank you. Nothing further.
All right, Ms. Spengler, do you have any follow-up questions?
I do not.
Okay. May this witness be released from his subpoena?
Your Honor, I'd like to keep him under subpoena just in case a chain of custody issue or something comes up because he participated in the collection of evidence, but I can't imagine I need to recall him.
Okay. All right, sir. You're done for now, but you may be recalled, okay? Thank you. Members of the jury, it's 7 after 12, so it's time to take our lunch break. Let's plan on taking the usual time, an hour and a half. Please keep all my advisements in mind during the break, and please follow each and every one of them, okay? Enjoy your lunch. I'll see you back here in an hour and a half. Thank you. The record should reflect that the jury has exited the courtroom. Everyone may be seated. Is there anything we need to talk about at this time on behalf of the people? Mr. Edson, you have something?
Judge, just very briefly, so the court is not caught off guard. Later this afternoon, we'll have one of a few witnesses through trial in which the way that evidence had to be packaged based upon the collection of evidence, there were numerous folks involved and actually numerous agencies involved, that there will be some exhibits that are attached to the packaging, some of which would be introduced through a witness, and the latter may not be introduced until another witness, something along those lines. So it's one of the situations where admission of the entire packet of evidence would be after that last individual would testify. I just wanted to bring that to the court's attention.
All right, thank you. Anything on behalf of the defense, Ms. Spengler? No. Okay, enjoy your lunch. I'll see you back here in an hour and a half. Thank you. The court will be in recess.